All right, man. Looks like we might have some pretty serious news here for Kamala Harris's campaign in the state of North Carolina. North Carolina, in my opinion, is the dogfight in the nation in this election cycle. Just keep in mind, obviously, North Carolina was the only swing state really that ended up going red, that didn't end up flipping blue. I guess a lot of people did think Florida was actually going to end up going blue if you want to count that. But in terms of the states that right now could be considered to go for Kamala Harris, the one that did not flip blue in 2020 was North Carolina, making it kind of the edgy choice. Now, everybody knows about Mark Robinson, and Mark Robinson, I think, is sort of a symptom of an underlying problem that exists with the Republicans ever since Trump has been chosen. Ever since with Roy Moore and all these different people, he keeps picking these really horrible candidates. And as you get higher and higher up, when you go to Senate races, gubernatorial races, as opposed to like House races, for example, the races become far more candidate based versus party based, right? Like your city council elections or even the House races is going to be much more party based. People don't know those people as well. But once you start getting to gubernatorial races, senatorial races, they become very candidate centered. So if you're running Dr. Oz and Herschel Walker and Mastriano and now Robinson and these guys, they're going to lose these races on the grounds of their candidacy. It really will, especially because a lot of times it's going to be in the margin. Now, we know as Mark Robinson had this big drop of information about all this crazy stuff where he said, he supported slavery of blacks. He's black himself, by the way. A lot of weird stuff where I guess he was having like a threesome with his wife's sister, which is fucking disgusting, man. Ugh. Fucking nasty, bro. So it's just complete insanity. But again, it's a symptom of an underlying problem with Donald Trump. Mark Robinson is just, you can think of it as a sequence, A sub N, where each A sub I is sort of, Mastriano, Moore, all these people. And if you want to do it in a permutation, you can start with Moore and, kind of go on and so forth, right? But he keeps picking these horrible people. And so we got some big news behind the scenes of what's going on. So, this article headline says, Harris campaign lays out its Mark Robinson strategy in North Carolina. Democrats plan to try Trump and Robinson as they target black voters, suburban voters, and moderate Republicans. So it says Kamala Harris's campaign advisors say the ongoing Mark Robinson scandal in North Carolina has given them a fresh opening with the state's black and suburban voters as they continue to try to tie Donald Trump to the embattled candidate for governor. Also, keep in mind he's not actually allowed to drop out anymore. He already missed the deadline. I think this stuff got released on that day, maybe because of those grounds, to try to get him out for the Republicans or something. But he has completely denied. His staff is resigning pretty much, but I guess he doesn't care. It goes on, it says the plan Harris advisors outlined in a memo provided exclusively to Politico involves seizing on the current barrage of negative attention on Robinson and putting resources behind targeting suburban voters in the Charlotte and Raleigh areas, moderate Republicans and black voters in the critical battleground state. Their messaging will focus not on a CNN report about comments Robinson made on a pornographic website, including that he enjoys, quote, watching tranny on girl porn, and instead will emphasize the controversial candidate's ties to Trump and his extreme policy positions. Scott Falmlen and L.T. McCrimmon, goddamn, kind of names are those, senior advisor to the Democrat coordinated campaign in North Carolina, wrote that as the Trump-endorsed Robinson, quote, consumes a political conversation in the state, and as Trump has begun to quietly distance himself from Robinson, Harris's team will continue to remind voters of the two Republicans' longstanding, quote, mutual support. The Harris team's research department has, quote, reams and reams of footage of the two of them embracing each other on the campaign trail, they wrote. Trump made Mark Robinson, and he will have to answer for him, the advisor said, and that's correct. He makes these people, he endorses these people and puts them at the top of the party ticket. And so, yeah, the strategy is obviously you want to tether them together, right? That's what you want to be able to do. You want to tether them. So how much of an impact is Mark Robinson going to have? It's going to be interesting because I don't know if their strategy is to turn out voters or if it's to convince voters. The problem with the convincing voters, I think, is you could try to convince people, but split ticket voting is very highly popular in the country. So you'll have states where the governor will be blue, maybe like Kentucky or whatever with Bashir, and then you'll have like the senators be red and all this stuff. It'll be split ticket, so people will vote for a governor that's one party and then senators who are another party. So presumably you would just have Stein be the blue vote and then Trump be the red vote for some of those candidates. How do you kind of convince those people to go strictly blue? The other thing is turnout, I think, is the main strategy in North Carolina. I don't think you really need to convince anybody. You might be able to convince some moderate Republicans who I am convinced there's going to be a small but increased margin of impact since 2020. I think the combo of January 6th and Stop the Steal has turned some small number of moderate Republicans, quote unquote moderate Republicans, off. And so I think there is actually a chance there's going to be some small margin of people who can do that. However, what we know from the Office of State Management and Budget in North Carolina's articles that they've put up and documents, there's been significant net migration into the state. They've added hundreds of thousands of people into the state, at least a couple 100,000 between 2020 and 2024. So they appear to be moving into the suburbs and the suburb adjacent areas. So if those people are Democrats, if they're Smurfs, you're going to have more people who are able to vote for you. So presumably you're trying to turn those people out. Now, another interesting thing, too, is Cook Political's website actually has like this kind of interesting sort of demographic marker. But if we take a look at North Carolina and we set it to the 2020 results, so these are the 2020 result numbers. It was only like, 1.3 or whatever was the margin of victories. It was really slim. But what you can see here is one of the things we saw was if you were to just turn up the number that Kamala Harris got of the white college graduates up to 49 and Trump gets 49, you would actually have a victory for Kamala Harris. She would end up winning if she gets up to 49%. He's at 49%. Another thing also that we saw was, now what we know is, the black/African American vote, they're 92% Democrat, 7% Republican in the state. Now, as I keep telling you guys, one of the things is convincing voters. So you might be like, man, like convincing those 7% of African Americans to vote for Kamala Harris would be so difficult. However, you don't need to do that. What can you always do? You can always increase voter turnout. So let's see how much you have to increase the voter turnout to be able to emerge victorious. And what you can see is once you get to 72% of the black African American vote turning out, with the same exact margin that they voted, Kamala Harris would end up winning the election. So I think North Carolina, you can try to kind of convert some of the moderate Republicans or suburban voters. I think that's a fine strategy. However, I think it should be focused on turnout. Because as you can see, we kept the black/African American vote, the margin of that win for, Joe Biden stagnant, 92.7. We kept it the same. But we increased the proportion of their voter turnout from 66.72. It was only 6% increase of voter turnout, and we see that it would actually flip the election. And so in this case, they make up 22.3% of the total populace. Here, has 22.2. So all you need to do is like this very small margin of increase. And so that's all you have to do. What we can see is, these kinds of areas. It'll be interesting as well because some of these areas are having, like Franklin and Johnson, these areas are having some growth, some pretty solid growth. So it'll be interesting. Those areas are red, but can you get people who are blue people in those areas? Can you get, are they blues that are moving into those areas? But most of your votes are probably going to come from areas like Wake County and these kinds of blue areas and, Chatham and stuff like that. But those are the kind of big blue areas. And then if we look at the North Carolina polls here right now, it looks like in the aggregate, it's only up to 0.6 for Trump, but there's been some kind of questionable polling. The New York Times Siena numbers don't really seem to make any sense. For example, they had like a 10-point surge in favor of Donald Trump in Arizona since the debate, which obviously is impossible. So their polls are very suspect. So another thing also was they had some numbers on, they had their Rust Belt and national numbers drop. They somehow, I get this, they had it tied nationally at 47-47, but in the second dogfight state, Pennsylvania, she was somehow leading by 4 points and cracking 50%. It's impossible. There's no way for that to happen. They can't be tied at 47 nationally, and then she's up 50-46 in Pennsylvania. It's not possible. She would have to be up by at least 5 nationally in order for those numbers to make sense. So I don't really take them seriously anymore, to be honest with you. This one has it even. But some of the polls here, +1s and +2s or whatever. But another thing to notice for Trump is he's weak right now. So he's not able to crack 50 in almost any of these polls. Now, in 2020, they missed a significant portion of his support, like 3%, which is unfortunate. They didn't really miss Biden's support. It was basically the same. They just really underestimated Trump. So what I would recommend if you're Kamala Harris is spam until you can get up to 50%. Because there's not much evidence of underperformance for you, there is a lot of evidence for overperformance for Trump, though. But you could see, plus one here. Plus one is good right now, too. It was pretty early on in the election as well. And then obviously Kamala Harris is going to have massive, massive overperformance in the numbers, especially with the oversampling of Republicans in the polls. Plus, you're going to have a bunch of the people who are supporting her now are going to get missed by the polls. So it's going to be a miss. This guy's a random person that's never been seen before, so I'm not taking him seriously. Emerson College says even, Morning Consult +2, Signal is tied. And then all three of these are right-wing pollsters, and the best they can muster up is +2 to +3. So all three of these are Republican pollsters, right? And then we have like a set of pretty good polls coming out for Kamala Harris in North Carolina. So North Carolina will be the tough one to do. Mark Robinson may be the one that actually ends up swinging the election for you potentially, if you can use him to convince enough moderates to vote for you, like maybe moderate Republicans or suburban voters. And then turnout, the black turnout is going to be huge, man. If you can just turn out black voters more, you can win the election. Just with even like a 5% increase, it would just be so massive. But huge news for Kamala Harris in the state of North Carolina. And we'll keep you updated on things that are going down in the state.